It is one of the great ironies of history that Britain, with her enviable track record of democratic traditions and defiance of overzealous monarchs who sought to gather all powers to the throne, evolved into a colonial power. Under the circumstances, it is pertinent to understand how national sentiments emerged in India and whether it shared any common ground with similar movements elsewhere across history and geography. In this chapter, we will study the following topics: the non-cooperation movement and overview, the civil disobedience movement and popular uprising 1930-34, and peasant, worker and tribal movement. Indian nationalism as a modern phenomenon. In the Indian context, the rise and growth of nationalism is closely related to British colonialism in India. Although the growing resentment against exploitation under British colonial rule was a shared emotion that tied different groups together, each section of Indian society felt the efforts of colonialism differently. It is not surprising that each such section had a different approach towards the struggle against colonialism. However, the Indian National Congress, under the leadership of Mahatma Gandhi, tried to unite the different sectoral interests under the umbrella of a single national movement. The First World War and India. Britain's declaration of war against Germany in 1914 automatically drew India into the conflict. As soon as the war ended, the economic situation took a turn for the worse. Prices of daily necessities rose alarmingly, and Indian industries faced heavy losses and even closure. The peasantry groaned under heavy rent and tax burdens. These things caused acute distress to the common people. It was at this critical juncture that a new leadership appeared in the political arena and propagated a new method of political rejuvenation. Emergence of Mahatma Gandhi. After grappling with apartheid in South Africa, Gandhiji returned to India in January 1915 with some ideas how colonialism could be tackled in India. After coming to India, Gandhiji successfully organized Satyagraha movements at various places. He experimented with it in Champaran in Bihar and in Ahmedabad and KHEDA in Gujarat. Satyagraha in Champaran, KHEDA and Ahmedabad. In 1916, Gandhiji traveled to Champaran to rouse the peasants to resist the oppressive Tin Khatiya system. Young nationalists like Rajendra Prasad and J.B. Kripalani had worked with him in Champaran and were impressed by his idealism as well as his dynamic, fearless, practical and down-to-earth approach to political action. Since the KHEDA district of Gujarat offered an opportunity similar to the Champaran experience, Gandhiji organized a satyagraha where the peasants refused to pay revenue no matter what the consequences. The mill workers of Ahmedabad had also caught his attention in 1918. He led them in a strike against the mill owners who had refused to pay them higher wages. Satyagraha against ROWLATT Act. When the ROWLATT bill was passed, despite unanimous Indian opposition, Gandhi decided to try and oppose it with Satyagraha, since the act gave the government enormous powers to repress political activities and allowed detention of political prisoners without trial for 2 years. Mahatma Gandhi started a Satyagraha Sabha and devised a pledge to disobey these repressive laws. A general strike all over the country was called for on 6th April 1919. It was a great success, but police firing on a Delhi crowd caused a number of casualties, both Hindu and Muslims. Gandhiji was barred from entering Delhi. Jallianwallah Bagh Incident. The infamous Jallianwallah Bagh incident took place on 13th April 1919. The people of Punjab had been agitated over the twin issues of war loans and Punjab Governor Michael O'Dyer's harsh methods. For example, forcible recruitment of peasants to fight for the Allies in the World War. The government overreacted by ordering the arrest of the two personalities involved in the turmoil, Dr. Satyapal and Dr. Saifuddin Kichlu. This caused further mob fury at Amritsar, where following an incident of police firing, some officials were killed and two British women were seriously injured. Public assembly was banned, but a crowd of rural people who gathered in a park called JALLIANWALLA BAGH on a festive occasion, Baisakhi, did not know that. General Dyer ordered all exit points of the park sealed and commanded his troops to open fire on the unarmed crowd. Hundreds of people were shot dead or wounded. After effect of Jallianwala Bagh massacre, the tragedy brought Gandhiji to the forefront of Indian politics. Gandhiji organized a passive resistance movement in protest against the unprovoked firing. A wave of mass demonstrations, strikes, and rioting engulfed many parts of India. The government responded with brutal repression, seeking to humiliate and terrorize people into submission. Seeing that violence was spreading unchecked, Mahatma Gandhi called off the agitation. The Khilafat movement. Two brothers, Muhammad Ali and Shaukat Ali, along with Maulana Abdul Kalam Azad, organized an anti-British mass movement of Muslims in India. This movement came to be known as the Khilafat movement. It was aimed at building political unity amongst Muslims and using their influence to protect the Caliphate. Gandhiji and the Khilafat movement. Gandhiji sympathized with the cause of Khilafat movement. He saw in the developments the possibility of forging the much-needed Hindu-Muslim unity needed to fight the British effectively. He therefore advised the Caliphate Committee to launch a non-cooperation movement against the government. The Congress and the Khilafat Committee agreed in 1920 on the triple agenda of non-cooperation, redressal of Punjab grievances, and rectification of Caliphate wrongs and establishment of Swaraj. The Khilafat movement and the national struggle for freedom. Gandhiji convinced the idea of channelizing the powerful currents of this united mass movement so as to give impetus to the national struggle for freedom. This took the shape of the non-violent, non-cooperation movement. Seeking to increase pressure on the British, the Khilafatists became a major part of the non-cooperation movement, a countrywide campaign of mass but peaceful civil disobedience. The non-cooperation movement. The non-cooperation movement was a major landmark of India's freedom movement in the 20th century. It was Mahatma Gandhi who first proposed the idea of non-cooperation against the British government. A special session of the Congress at Calcutta in September 1920 adopted the famous resolution of non-cooperation. It was based on three issues: to resolve the Khilafat issue, to redress the wrong done on the people of Punjab, and to attain Swaraj. Programs and outlook. The non-cooperation movement had two kinds of objectives: constructive and destructive. Its positive or constructive programs included establishment of national educational institutions, panchayat courts, abolition of untouchability, Hindu-Muslim unity, promotion of spinning and weaving. In regard to the latter, non-cooperation involved the boycott of the following: British goods, elections to the legislature in the country, courts and offices, schools and colleges by the students, and also included surrender of titles and honors conferred by the British government. The Congress appealed to the people to use Swadeshi or indigenously made goods and to follow peaceful and legitimate means to achieve the ends. The non-cooperation movement initially seemed to gather great momentum. Gandhiji travelled all over the country to enlist the support of the people. People from different places defied the British government. Withdrawal of the movement. The government of India arrested all the important leaders except Gandhiji, but a little later Gandhiji was also arrested. This was followed by serious mob violence in Chori Chora in the United Provinces. As the movement was gradually becoming violent and lawless, Gandhiji decided to withdraw it for the moment. No tax campaign under Swaraj government. The times were hard, particularly for the lower classes. This fact was utilized by some local leaders to place non-cooperation in a favorable light. Some of them made promises of no taxes and no rent under a Swaraj government, implying that Gandhiji had sanctioned such promises. This strategy met with considerable success in the parts of Madras and Bengal. Swaraj and the Assam Tea Garden Coolies. Under the Inland Immigration Act of 1922, plantation workers were not permitted to leave the tea gardens without permission in the Chargola Valley Tea Estate in Assam. In fact, they were rarely given such permission. When they heard of the non-cooperation movement, thousands of workers defied the authorities, left the plantations and headed for home. The non-cooperators, having successfully manufactured a fresh grievance, now proceeded to exploit it. A general strike was called among the staff of both Assam and Bengal railways and steamer services in Bengal. But this backfired on the runaway plantation workers. Stranded en route by the railway and steamer strike, the workers were nabbed by the police and brutally thrashed. Causes of failure of non-cooperation movement. The non-cooperation movement failed due to various reasons. The Muslims were very critical and apprehensive about their status in and after the movement. One section of the Congress party did not support the movement. They felt it was better to take the British route to reconciliation via council elections, etc. One part left the Congress and formed a new party called the Swaraj Party, with leaders such as C.R. Das and Motilal Nehru. Again, the British government adopted repressive measures to stop the movement. Gandhiji's decision to suspend the movement midway was not appreciated by some congressmen. Thus, the non-cooperation movement gradually faded away, after achieving partial success, but it paved the way for the success of the civil disobedience and Quit India movements.